Good morning and welcome. We're thrilled that you're at the University of Richmond. It's a real honor for the university to host this tremendous event. I'm very pleased to be joined by Hunter Lansing and Tommy Clements on a panel that we're going to talk about growth. Now, the format for this is going to be a little different perhaps than typical. I'm going to spend a few minutes with Tommy at the outset so that you get an appreciation for the story of VSC, Fire and Security, and then we'll talk to Hunter for a bit. I don't know these gentlemen all that well. So this is going to be a bit raw. I got a few minutes with Tommy in person last month, and Hunter and I met for the first time last night at the dinner. So here we go. I'm going to operate without notes. I want this to be a conversation, and you'll be invited to join the conversation late in the hour. So Tommy, in some ways, you talk about the Markel family, you're the older brother, in that VSC's been a part of this Markel family for just a slightly longer time.
4 months.
Than Lansing Building Products. Question I want to ask you is to reflect on the last 6 years, because in 2017, you were running a business in Arkansas, and you were approached by VSC. Now, you knew them at the time. Eventually, acquisition happens, 2017, 2018, 2019. You come up here to Richmond. And then in 2019 is when Markel gets involved. I'd love for you to talk about growth from 2017 to 2020.
Okay.
And then growth from 2020 to 2023, if you would.
Sure. So 2017, I had bought a business in 2009 with private equity backing, and they held it longer than expected due to the downturn in 2009. My timing was impeccable on when to buy a business. And so we, when it came time to sell the business, and I realized they were ready to go, I actually contacted VSC. I knew of VSC, Mike Meehan, our chairman, and I had served together. So the growth period we saw, of course, again, but going back to timing, 2017, from the time that I was bought by VSC, VSC, a very decentralized organization, much like Markel Ventures, and really allowed me to continue to run the business, and fully supportive of what we were doing in our market. My responsibility was effectively the offices that I had. And we did an acquisition during that period of time in another city in Arkansas, and so really didn't see anything change in terms of. As a matter of fact, VSC was much more supportive of even the private equity guys that didn't really want to put any more money into the business at that time. So great opportunities there, and then of course when the actual transaction with Markel occurred in November of 19, again. Markel is the ultimate supportive parent, if you will. And so, from that point forward, really, of course, November 19, everybody knows March of 2020, are you going to, as Mike, our chairman says, we didn't know if we were going to open the doors the next day kind of thing, as nobody else did either. But once we got through that COVID period of time, which really, frankly, didn't impact our business but for about 2 months, really got the backing and understanding. Of course, there's this period of time where you really don't know, okay, we have a new corporate parent. How's that going to work? What's their appetite for, acquisitive growth and those kinds of things? And just the support that we've seen as part of the Markel Ventures family moving forward has been nothing short of spectacular. And to that point, we did 6 acquisitions in 5 months last year, in the last 5 months of last year. And it's all about making the right decision for the business moving forward.
Your business is selling and servicing fire installation, fire security, alarms, those kinds of things. You do it mostly through the Southeast. Many of these acquisitions were expanding the territory just a little bit south and a little bit toward the west. Is it about geographic expansion, Tommy? How do you identify these targets when you're going to bring a new firm?
It's really not. We don't. It's funny. We don't really ask where. We don't really ask what. Our first question is who. Do they fit? Do the people that run the business fit with us? Tom Gaynor told Mike Meehan very early in the courtship between Markel and VSC, Markel's not for everybody and everybody's not for us, and we have a very similar philosophy, and so we look at the next acquisition opportunity really through the lens of, is this a good partnership? Is this a long-term opportunity for us to partner with good people, and that want to do the right thing and want to run the business the right way? So,
One of the interesting bits about this is what gets centralized and what do you allow the businesses to continue to run. I'm going to ask Hunter a similar question later on, given how geographically spread out they are. 6 firms in 5 months. It feels like you'd be in a rush to try to centralize what you can, while maybe honoring the legacy of the firms that you've acquired, and many of those are family-run firms.
Yeah, it's really not a rush. I wouldn't say it's a rush. It's really more about recognizing where there's true value to be gained from that centralization effort. Again, we're a very decentralized firm. We'll always allow and demand, frankly, that the operational decision-making occur at the local level. I can't know from Richmond, what the driving market rates are in Houston, Texas, or Little Rock, Arkansas, or Atlanta, Georgia. I don't know what I have to pay people in those markets. It's very difficult to try and bring that back, and I think we would end up creating a big bottleneck if we did that. Some of the back-of-house functions, which quite frankly, a lot of the companies that we purchase, that's not why they're in the business. They're not in the business to talk to the lawyers and the bankers and the insurance guys and the bonding guys. They're in the business to hang pipe or pull wire or whatever it is they happen to do. And it's freeing to them a lot of times when some of that back office supports, gets put behind them and allowed to continue. Our chairman has a very famous thing, three legs of our stool. We get work, we do work, and we keep score. And the getting work and the doing work has to stay local. The keeping score we like to help with, and where it makes sense, we try to do that.
Private equity has entered your industry in a big way in the last several years. How has it impacted the way that you look at potential acquisitions?
There's a lot more acquisition opportunity out there because people are just aware that I look at it as there's 2 things that have kind of happened in our market. One is the recurring nature of some components of our business have been recognized by the private equity groups. That recurring nature obviously allows them to financially engineer some things, and that's driven valuations up. At the same time, we have something of a demographic issue going on. A lot of these businesses, a lot of these firms are held by, baby boomers and, people that are in their 60s and 70s, and they're ready to exit. They oftentimes don't have family members that want to be in the business, and the valuations historically in not just fire protection, but in a lot of the trade businesses, the avenues for exit were family or your second tier line of management. And if you went the second tier line of management, you toted a 5-year note back to the company, and you were selling a business at a 3x multiple, and the business would cash flow the note, and everybody was happy. The valuations have gotten to the point where you just can't do that anymore. So you either have to allow, an owner has to allow himself to extend the period by which they get their money, or they have to seek other opportunities. And so there's a lot more opportunities out there for us.
4 months after this deal was announced, Hunter, you put out a press release that said, one, you had acquired a firm in the Northeast called Harvey, and at the same time you had welcomed an investment from Markel. Tommy was talking here about family, and so I want to start there. You're the 3rd generation Lansing to run the firm. What was the firm at the time that you took over, and what was it at the time that Markel said we'd like to make an investment there?
When Markel, before we engaged with Markel, we were a 3rd generation family business. We 112 locations around the country. We're a building products distributor specializing in siding, windows, doors, gutter, products of that nature. And fortunately enough, I was privileged enough to be running the family business and had siblings in it, and my dad was in it, and things were great. And we had an opportunity to do, as Richard said, a pretty transformational acquisition. And I took that to my family, and we realized really quickly that this would require a financial partner. And we began looking, and not surprisingly, but the investment bank that we were working with that's here had never done a deal with Markel. And so we had interviewed a handful of different private equity groups. None of them felt right to me or comfortable. And then just growing up in Richmond, of course, everyone knows Markel. And we said, why don't we speak to the folks at Markel? And Tom and Mike and Andrew came in, and I can say pretty quickly I knew that would be the partner that we would want to have to go do this acquisition.
Speak for a moment, if you would, about the integration of Harvey, because as you said, this was a big deal, not a small one. What were the steps that you had to undertake? How much of Harvey came into Lansing, if you will, and how much of Lansing really became what Harvey had been? In other words, the strong culture and legacy that your family had built. Did any bit of Harvey, did you feel like, bleed into the firm at the time of the acquisition?
You know, when we look at acquisitions, yes, we look at geographies, we look at product mix, we look at those kinds of things. But what we look at first is really people and culture. And do those two things line up? And if they do, then we think that there's an opportunity to really capitalize on this potential acquisition. And so with Harvey, it was a company that we had known my family had known since the early 60s, and we had sort of grown up together in the business. And so we knew that there was that good base of people and culture there. So as you sort of said earlier, Richard, we signed on this acquisition, I think it was March 7th, 2020. We didn't announce, some of you may know, we didn't announce until about a week later, March 16th, 2020, and that was arguably day one of COVID. And it was just terrible timing at that moment. But the point I want to make is, having to integrate, they're roughly about a $450 million distributor up in the Northeast, and to integrate a company and to cut them over from their operating platform onto ours at the height of a global pandemic, up in arguably the teeth of the pandemic and the Northeast, was intimidating. Certainly, I'll speak for myself. My team did just an unbelievable job. But we knew that we were going to have to physically have Lansing associates sort of working shoulder to shoulder with these Harvey associates when we cut them over to our platform. And I have to say, I was worried that we wouldn't get enough volunteers to go up to the Northeast in September, October of 2020 to do this. But we just have unbelievable people. We had more than enough volunteers go up there and make sure that we cut them over onto our platform, and did that really seamlessly. So that's one example of how the integration went. I don't want to act like it was all roses and just went really smoothly. Overall, it did, but because we have amazing people, we were able to do that.
Your growth has largely been organic. Yours is a relationship business, and my sense is that your relationships with contractors, a couple of aims are to deepen the relationships with the existing contractors and to establish relationships with contractors that you don't know so well. What makes Lansing successful on that front?
You know, for us, it's all about people. And if we don't have great people, we don't have a business. And the numbers that we're able to produce and the revenues and margin and cash flow and all that stuff, it doesn't happen without just tremendous people. So that's number one, and we try as best we can to carry that over to our customers and making sure that we have great relationships with them, where we're fostering relationships of trust and respect and mutual understanding and those sorts of things. So yeah, that's really important for us at Lansing.
Tommy mentioned keeping score, so I'm going to ask you about keeping score, and I'm going to come back to you, Tommy, about keeping score. In the first panel this morning, Tom Gaynor used your company as an example of one that has utilized the best places to work as a framework. I know that's one way that you keep score. Can you share with this audience what you do with what you get from the best places to work, and then other metrics that are important to you, Hunter?
So I'll first start by saying we have 3 long-term goals. The first one is to be a best-in-class place to work and build a career. And what Richard was, what you're referring to was that may sound sort of nice and cute and pie in the sky, but how do you really know if you're a best-in-class place to work and build a career? How do you measure that? And so we do it through our participation in the Great Place to Work survey. And it's an annual survey where we really strongly encourage our people to take it. Last year we had 98% participation of nearly 2,000 of our associates. And then 85% of our people either agreed or strongly agreed that Lansing is a great place to work. We believe being best in class is being in that 90% range. And so we've been incrementally improving over the past couple years, but we've got a little ways to go. So we're taking the survey. It's coming up in 14 days to be exact, when it'll be open. And first step is making sure that we have 100% participation.
In this day and age, getting 85% of your workforce to say that they agree or strongly agree that it's a great place to work is really otherworldly. I mean, it is. I know you're aiming for 90, but the benchmark that the Institute puts out, I think, is 57% as you know, pretty good.
Overachiever.
No. We got a lot of shortcomings, don't worry.
That extra 1% or 2% or 3% or 4%, I know you're very plugged into the conversation that's going on, you know, among the leaders in the firm, but what's the difference between 85% and 90% for Lansing? What do you believe will be the key to moving to that benchmark for you?
You know, what we do after we get the data and we get all the feedback, and as Tom said, it comes in a pretty thick book. We have the numeric. There's 60 statements, and you either strongly agree or strongly disagree, and everywhere in between. And so you get that data, and then you also get this more subjective. There's 2 open-ended questions. What do you like about Lansing? What do you not like about Lansing, essentially? And so we take that, and my team and I really try to understand what our folks are saying. We have an evaluation and response team made up of various individuals throughout the business, and we don't share everything with them, but we share a lot with them, and they kind of look at it, and we come up with a couple of things that we really try to zero in on over the course of the year. And so this past year, it's been 3 things. Of course, it's been compensation and benefits. There's been a steady drumbeat of that for a long time, but there's small incremental things that we've been doing there. Communication, better in communication internally amongst our people. And then the third one was a new one for us this past year, what we call community. We have a Lansing Foundation. It's something that we've been building over the past couple years, but our folks really said we want to see that really more front and center inside the business. We want to know more about what's happening within the Lansing Foundation. So we've put a lot of things in place to work on and get better in each of those 3 areas. And along the way, we report back to our people. This is what you said. This is what we're working on, and here's our progress in each of these 3 areas.
It's interesting how things this day tie together. I was at Roberto Castro's talk from CapTech this morning. He was talking about really putting the purpose front and center, that's a way to attract and retain. Tommy, let's talk about how you keep score.
So from a financial standpoint, obviously, we try to track our different business lines, and mix is kind of, it's one of the things that the private equity groups are really pinging on lately, and this concept of the recurring component versus the contract component, and the general philosophy that the contract component is much more economically driven, which it is. We are a largely regulatory driven business, and so people can't just decide, well, I'm going to build an auditorium and not put fire sprinklers in it. And so we track that mix. We're not really driving for a mix. A lot of the private equity-backed groups are really driving for a mix. We don't drive for a mix. And as a matter of fact, we actually see opportunities in some places where that mix is abandoning perhaps some of the construction opportunities that are out there. Firms like ours, I heard it. I had a friend who sold his business to a private equity group and said, "You're going to generate $1 million in cash flow and destroy $5 million in value," which just was an absolutely mind-blowing statement to me. But when you're worried about how you're going to sell your business, maybe that's important to you. But so yeah, it's this mixture of having the local offices that are tracking their metrics and what they're trying to accomplish, both from a margin realization standpoint and and then a mixed standpoint, and then bringing that back up to corporate and trying to roll it all up.
And how much of that conversation is about the top line, and how much of it is about what flows through to the bottom line in terms of finding efficiencies in these firms after you acquire them?
Well, obviously, it's all about the bottom line. But, no, it's, when you look at the margins in our business and you look at, again, you look at these, we're a labor-driven business. I mean, it's pipe, it's wire, it's components. But labor is our limiting factor. And so you're trying to maximize the margin on that labor. And so you really have to kind of drive into, well, where does that occur? Mm-hmm. And then where, sure, it occurs largely in the service and inspection and recurring components, but where's your opportunity there? And how do you drive that opportunity, and how do you go find that, with the sales team and those kinds of things? So, that's how we have to look at it moving forward.
You're in higher ed, you're in healthcare, you're in warehousing, you're in office buildings.
Thankfully, not much in office buildings.
Well, I was going to ask about the macro trends that you track, but would you describe for this audience a bit about, say, a typical hospital and how a hospital looks through the eyes of a CEO of a fire protection firm?
Very ugly. Anybody that's in construction knows that there's 10 pounds of stuff above the ceiling, and that's about a 5-pound ceiling. So trying to figure out how to fish pipe through there. But you have to look at the different types of facilities that you're working on differently. Hospitals are complicated, and not in jest, but the number of systems that are present in a hospital are just really make the coordination of the trades, and that's really where it boils down to a lot of times is how difficult is the coordination going to be? Are you going to be able to install this at some fraction of an hour per sprinkler head, or is it going to be a hospital at 6 or 8 hours per sprinkler head type of metrics? And so. And again, that's where that local determination, who's the general contractor on that project. You mentioned the education world. When in Arkansas, we were very large. We had a large education book of business, and VSC really tried to shy away from that book because it's often driven by the lowest price wins, and you don't necessarily always get the highest quality coordinators in your general contractor. And in Arkansas, we had a different method of contracting at the state level that allowed you to interview quality contractors and make a qualitative and quantitative analysis and selection. So again, that's an example of a decision that really resides locally, because who's the contractor on that hospital? Who are the other subcontractors on that hospital? How well do you work together? Those types of things. So you just have to look at it through that lens.
One more question for you, and then I'm coming to you, Hunter. What does national accounts look like in a business like yours? You're geographically spread out enough now, and it feels like there should be enough overlap that you could establish something resembling national accounts. But what is that like in your industry? So
national accounts typically in our industry has kind of a bad name, if you will, because it's typically a broker arrangement. I'll take Walmart as an example, mm-hmm. Target, Home Depot. They go to this broker or a couple of brokers if they're national, and they say, we want you to be our single point of contact. And look, they're looking to push the easy button, and understandably. And but they typically they then broker it down to somebody like us that's operating in a local market. What we've seen is a lot of frustration on the owner's parts. Walmart is an example. Went from 3 national account providers, basically one on the east, one in the central, one on the west, and they pulled that back, and they felt like they were getting the runaround. They weren't getting told the truth. They weren't getting the responses that they want. They pulled that back, and they started to regionalize it and say, look, we want to work with self-performing entities. That sentiment we have found a lot of agreement with a lot of these types of owners. And so, Extra Space Storage, Target Distribution, Amazon, a lot of these companies like that we are working with, and we're not out trying to be a national account. Matter of fact, we actually made the express decision to label it enterprise accounts within our own organization, because we're not trying to be a national broker. We're trying to self-perform at a high level of service for these customers and still make it easy for them to interact with us by having a single point of contact, a single team that they don't have to figure out, okay, if I'm in this city in North Carolina, do I call Raleigh? Do I call Charlotte? Do I call Greenville, South Carolina? Who do I call? And we've tried to take that off their plates.
Hunter, you spoke about trying to create best-in-class experience for your customers as well. How much of what I was just talking about with Tommy translates to your business in terms of serving them at a national level and a local level simultaneously?
Most of our customers are served at a local level. We have a few national accounts, but not many. Our core customer is the guy or girl that operates his business out of the back of his truck and buys somewhere from $120,000 to $350,000 from us a year. And his wife usually keeps his books, and he's selling jobs, and he's got a crew, and he wears a tool belt and climbs a ladder and sort of does a little bit of everything. One week he might be replacing someone's siding. The next week he's working 3 doors down, and he's putting in replacement windows. Like that individual, our value speaks to that kind of customer.
I really appreciate how you illustrated the perspective of your customer for this audience, and I wonder, given that, what does a best-in-class experience mean to that customer? What are you having to provide in order to win them and keep them as your customers?
That customer is really looking for what we like to say within Lansing. It's an experience, and they're looking for a distributor that knows them, understands their business, and then looks for ways outside of delivering material to them on time and having high quality products. That we like to say that's table stakes in our business. What are we doing outside of that? And so finding ways to help that customer of ours grow his business. And so we have a marketing department that really isn't internally focused, they're externally focused, and helping them generate leads, helping them with very simple things like business cards, or putting them in touch with a company that'll build them a basic website, maybe building him a pitch book so when he sits down with Mr. and Mrs. Jones and he's pitching James Hardie siding or Certainteed roofing, that he just has a little bit more of a professional presentation. And so we look for ways to really partner with our customers, show them that we care, so they can help and grow their businesses. That's a way.
It seems to me that training's got to be a key piece of that, because not every salesperson's going to master that set of skills, the kind of extended sale that you're talking about. Would you share with this audience some of what you all are doing around training of all kind, but particularly around this kind?
Sure. So training is a real big focus for us. We understand, we know that in order to have sales reps and inside sales reps or anyone within our business that is successful in what they're doing, they got to know how to do that really well. And so this week, for example, we have what we call a Lansing University 2 group that is here. We have about a dozen newish branch managers, and we have one, I think, potential branch manager. But we bring them here into Richmond. These branch managers have P&L responsibility, so we do everything from teach them how to read and understand a P&L to how to work with their people, leadership skills, how to work with and interface with whether it's our human resources department or our operations group. We kind of teach them this second sort of 2,000 level class, but we also continue to train them in ways that they can help and assist our customers outside the bounds of building products.
Is that a part of a succession planning process that you have, that they'll get this kind of training, and maybe you've identified a few who could move up a level or two? Can you talk a little bit about the tie between the training and the succession planning?
We identify individuals within the company that we think have potential to go on and do more. And so I'd mentioned we have a sales rep that's here this week, and we think he has the opportunity to be a branch manager down the road, and so that's why he's here. Yeah. But it's also about identifying branch managers that are new in their role and need to be better, but they also could potentially be regional managers for us down the road. We're not there yet, Richard, and full disclosure, Yep. This is an area that we're working on, and I would say we're sort of early steps in doing a better job of identifying these potential leaders within the business and really establishing a roadmap for them to be able to progress and move on, and should they wish, take on more responsibility at Lansing.
I started this round of questioning around customers and best-in-class experience. Hunter, if one of your customers is not having a best-in-class experience, how do you find out about it?
So we have about 423 trucks around the country in all 112 of our locations. And all of those trucks, at least I think on all three sides of it, have 1-800-Lansing, and that number goes straight to my desk. And so I know about that, and I will get those calls from time to time. And I don't get a lot, but again, that's just it's been that way for decades within our business. My dad did it, and I do it, and it's just a high level of accountability. And so our sales team sells that to our customers, that if anything isn't right or you're not happy, you can reach Hunter and pick up the phone and talk to him. And so that really is a part of our culture that I think speaks to our people, but also speaks to our customers.
Thank you for that. Tommy, I'm turning to you now to talk about technology. This is a pretty low-tech solution he has, a 1-800 number that rings to his desk.
Well, do I have a low-tech solution for you?
How's technology shaping your business and your industry in a variety of ways? I'm thinking about the technology in terms of what you're installing and how that's evolving, but also back of the house in terms of you integrating. I can only imagine when you acquire 6 firms in 5 months, what the technology platforms might look like and the decisions you face around technology. So if you'd speak to both of those, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. A couple areas from the back of house. Obviously, the big one is the ERP or the accounting systems, and depending on the size of the firm that you're acquiring, whether that's a complicated Sage type product, or if that's a QuickBooks or QuickBooks Pro or whatever. And so those integrations are important because, again, part of the scorekeeping. I think where the real innovations are really impacting our business are both in the manufacturers. I think there's 4 major manufacturers of sprinkler heads, just as an example. The work that they're doing to solve problems and the leadership of those organizations that are looking to say, okay, well, are they building buildings taller? Are they trying to stack storage higher? How do we protect that appropriately? What technology is needed in the sprinkler head or in the fire alarm type systems? How are we going to do that? Reduce false alarms, reduce false activations, and yet provide a high level of protection. And I think a lot of that work that's going on is really driving the installation activities. Stepping back to the design activities, I mean, we're 99% a design build trade. We don't get a set of drawings from an architect or an engineer, and when we do, and I apologize to the architects and engineers in the group, I am an engineer, but they're really not worth the paper they're written on generally. And so we take that set of drawings and we operate to a set of standards that are promulgated by the NFPA, and the software that's utilized to actually put those drawings, or put those, we call it spot and dots, the sprinkler heads on the paper, or the alarm devices on the paper, routing the pipe, performing the hydraulic calculations to make the most efficient design. Those activities and a new, relatively, it's not new, but the BIM, building information modeling type technologies that are out there, how we integrate into those technologies, and a lot of what that's doing, I think, with firms like ours, particularly firms that, again, are largely design build type operations, it's pushing us further up the project timeline. With this, when lean construction concepts and package building and those types of things started becoming kind of in vogue in the industry, what you're seeing is they can't wait for us to spend 8 weeks once they contract with us, and so they're having to move the point at which they reach out to us is moving up the project timeline. in some markets more than others. But that technology around AutoCAD or whatever that we're utilizing is, that's an area, and quite frankly, probably an area where, and not to bring out a buzzword with 24 minutes left, but AI is probably going to have an impact in that over time, I would expect.
But in the meantime, how's it changing the hiring process and who you target to bring into your firm? If they're moving up the project timeline, I suspect it means you have to have a slightly different mix of talent.
Yeah, I think the sales component is a little different. Potentially, we haven't seen that impact much. So much of that is still driven by the general contractor relationship with our project managers and estimators and sales folks. And so, to Hunter's point about the relationship-driven activities, that's where a lot of the value lies is in that personal relationship. They've worked with you enough to know that you're gonna perform on the project. If they have a problem, they know who to call to get it solved, and those types of things. So I wouldn't say that it's really impacted that very much. I will say on the design side, the gamification of the design component we've certainly seen that. The expectations around the hardware that we provide for that activity has elevated with that different type of employee.
Hunter, for the last few years, you're operating against Vision 2025. What are the components of Vision 2025 for your business, and what does it mean in terms of the investments you're making today to help that be realized?
In technology?
Yeah, and elsewhere.
Elsewhere? Technology for us is a huge one. We're making major investments in that. I think I categorize it, I know I categorize it in a couple different areas. The first is that it's not here yet, but our customers in the very near future, don't know how far out it is, but they're going to have an expectation that they're able to order materials, have it delivered to their job site within 18 to 36 hours later and basically not talk to a human being. And we've been preparing for that day for 6 or 7 years now, and so we've been doing that. We started tackling what we call inventory accuracy and then pricing consistency. Those two things really lead us to our e-commerce platform. And I know that sounds pretty archaic, like we're investing in an e-commerce platform, but it's just our industry, our customer base they're just late adopters on things like that. So there's been a lot of investment over the past 6 or 7 years in those areas, a lot of hours and energy, just people hours that we've spent on that too. The other area where we're really making investments and trying to get better is through our utilization of internal data, and that's on our CRM Salesforce. And so what we're trying to solve for, we've had a CRM now for almost 10 years. What we're trying to solve for is really putting our sales team in the right place at the right time, selling the right customers, or talking about and selling the right products to the right customers. And so that, again, is a pretty lofty thing to try and solve for. I'm not suggesting that we're there yet, but we believe that the companies that are really going to win over time are the ones that really they're really smart about how they put their own internal data to work and how they use that. But then they also, and this is the hardest part, take external data and marry that up with their internal data and then put that in a digestible way for their sales team to be able to understand and know where to be at the right time, talking to the right customers with the right products. And so there's been a lot of both man hours and dollars that have been put into that as well.